Hey, welcome to Keep It in Perspective. It's Christian Hanley. Trying out a new format now, actually trying to do some video in addition to audio for this podcast. It's a first here. I've done video for TV, obviously, been on camera for TV, but never actually incorporated the video here for recording the podcast. We'll see how that goes. It's a weird setup. I'm not quite comfortable with it yet, but we'll see what happens. I'm joined this week by my friend and one of our returning champions on the podcast, Brittany McCants Garcia. We're talking about just the crazy couple of weeks it's been, what's going on in the Supreme Court, all of the ridiculous, absurd decisions from the overturning of Roe v. Wade to Clarence Thomas's his laundry list of the cases he's hoping to overturn to stick it to the libs, as it were, and violate or scrape away the personal individual rights of millions of Americans, to the Supreme Court swatting away over 100 years of precedent in New York state law just to make sure that every single person, as many people as possible, can carry guns, no matter where, no matter how much of a legitimate interest we have in our public safety. And of course, we chat a little bit about what's going on with the January 6th committee and the bombshell that Liz Cheney recently dropped on July the 12th. So getting into that just now. Enjoy the new format if you're watching. Otherwise, if you're listening, stay tuned and thank you. I guess it works.
It works. I warn you now. I just can hear the storm rolling in. So if my power or whatever knocks out.
Oh, that might happen. Yeah, outside my window, it looks like it's maybe 9 o'clock at night. Yeah. I had the radio on and they interrupted it saying like it's coming in from Virginia, hail, down trees. So that was a lightning strike by my kid's school. We can't get a break.
I know. You only had one job. And the internet goes.
Yep, exactly. I'm not sure what you heard of me saying, but
the last thing I heard you say was, "What job do you know?"
Oh, yeah. Okay, right. So before the power went out, yeah. So I was just thinking, before even getting into like analyzing cases or talking about some of the bullshit coming out of the court recently, like if you just think about this right-wing extremist supermajority that's on there right now, these at the time judges, before they were confirmed, they go before the U.S. Senate and equivocate and bullshit and frankly lie under oath about Roe v. Wade in particular. Like the other questions are asked on precedent, you can argue they bullshitted, they equivocated, they gave vague answers, but when it came to Roe, they lied, right? They lied under oath. I think in a lot of jobs, if you even like bullshitted your resume, they'd just fire you if they found out. What other job can you lie under oath in an attempt to get it? And then after you confirm that you've lied under oath, you've committed perjury, then keep that job, especially someone who's serving as a fucking judge or a Supreme Court justice.
Well, I mean, there's no way to actually fire a sitting judge, is there? I don't, I mean, there's no.
I'm saying.
We have articles of impeachment for presidents. We have all of the processes that you can use to remove congressmen.
Yeah.
Unless I'm mistaken, I don't know of anything that you can do to remove a Supreme Court justice.
I mean, not effectively. There has been an impeachment or two, but I don't think there was ever a removal, maybe one in history. And even that was generations ago.
I mean, at the time.
Even that, I need to go back and find it. But I'm thinking like, okay, you've got Thomas, who has lied on his taxes and has flagrant conflicts of interest with his wife, who is now implicated in a coup attempt against the United States. And then you've got Coney Barrett, Kavanaugh. I mean, these right-wingers who basically go in front of the Senate and say, like, yes, Senator Whitehouse, like, totally no. I mean, Roe is settled, that will never be overturned. And they just get in there like, fuck yeah, let's start typing. I mean where else can you pull some shit like that?
There's no mechanism in place to well, well, it was never the thing. Was it, those commercials where that's not how any of this works. That's not how any of this is supposed to work.
Yeah.
That's what the original threshold plan was, is that you would never put people in these roles who would need to be removed because, right, they're supposed to be the Supreme Court, as in supreme jurists, as in people that are of the utmost integrity, that 100 congressmen was actually, excuse me, yes, am I correct? Yes, 100 senators
Yeah.
have all agreed, have the appropriate temperament, qualification, and background to sit in this role that is universally unchallengeable.
Yeah. I mean, that's that, but that brings us to another point though, which is like, yes, it's pretty much unchallengeable, right? They are insulated from public opinion, from electoral politics, even from ethics proceedings that would govern other federal appointees, right? On the other hand, they have no mechanism to enforce their decisions. And so the issue now is like, look, that was always kind of the trade-off with that branch of government, right? Like it cannot be touched. Also, it has no enforcement mechanisms.
Well, so I can't remember. I'm giving you this example. When I was in college, one of the in the classes I took when I was poli-sci major is judge, and judge, which was highly problematic. I remember he went to the front of the classroom and was like, "What does the Supreme Court have in common with an 800-pound gorilla?" And I was like, 800-pound gorilla in a cage, and all of us were like, "We don't know." And his answer was, it can't touch anything outside of that cage, but once whatever gets inside of that cage, the gorilla controls everything else. There is nothing that you can do to stop that gorilla. And as a younger person, I did not appreciate that. I understood in theory, but until now, I had never thought about what happens if we have an 800-pound gorilla that is now able to, once the thing is inside of the cage, there's nothing we can do about it. This, I hate to say it like this, it's not a Harambe situation, like where you can choose.
Not a Harambe.
It's not. There's literally nothing you can do. So it's true, yes, that they can't touch anything outside of those four walls, outside of the cage. But I feel like we're seeing even now with I think I saw that applications for concealed weapons in my home state, Maryland, are up by 700%. So we can say that what they do doesn't impact everyone outside. There's no enforceability, but they are the rule of law. And so what they say goes, and the country has been almost in a whirlwind since the Second Amendment case came down. So, I mean, it's not as if that example of the 800-pound gorilla isn't accurate.
Well, no, but I mean, like, so I guess my concern is, and this has been raised by other people as well, is that, okay, so yes, their decisions have effect because, for example, even though that case came out of a New York case, it still has impact for all the states, including Maryland, which has great gun laws in terms of protecting public safety. And before any right-wing nut jobs like try to jump in here, like, yes, you know about Baltimore, a lot of those guns are illegal, trafficked, straw buyers, all that bullshit. All right. In terms of lawful gun purchases, though, there are rules and regulations. I guess my concern is the Supreme Court can have those decisions be enforced by those other third parties, state government officials, other branches of the federal government, agencies, etc. But if the right wing continues to sort of delegitimize the court, packing it with people who are not approved by the representatives of most Americans, people don't respect those decisions anymore and stop listening, what then? I mean, in other words, like, everyone's in shock right now, but I could see a future where it's yet another egregious decision. Like, toddlers have the right to carry fucking machine guns or whatever thing they're going to do next. And you have sort of like that moment where, you know, maybe it's the attorney general of not Maryland, but another state saying like, great, they've made their decision, let them enforce it. I'm still not going to give an AK to a baby.
You're not, but someone else.
Oh, sure. No, I know. Oh, I'm sure in Alabama, they'll be proud to do it. They'll have a whole press conference and everything. Yeah. But you get what I'm saying, right? Like,
I get what you're saying.
It causes a crisis of legitimacy.
Well, legitimacy in that if the state governments weren't packed to the brim with people that fall along the same ideological lines, we're sitting in the midst of midterms, and I can't tell you how many commercials I see every day about the people, like for example, Donna Edwards in my jurisdiction are like, people are saying a real Democrat, someone that's gonna really stand up to the gun lobby, et cetera, and so on. And so, yes, in theory, there could be a repudiation of the rules, but not if the people that operate those states don't. And that's where we are with Roe, right? Yeah. Which is in Maryland, New York, everywhere else. I mean, we're observing that this is horrible in other jurisdictions for right now. But we're not impacted. We think that in these jurisdictions that are not, you know, I would say that are blue, even the jurisdictions that are purple, that some of these opinions are not going to impact us, but for how long? Yeah. Well, no, I mean, they're gonna affect everyone, definitely. But I do still wonder, because already there are people talking about the fact that they've lost faith in the courts, and you know, the thing that I don't think people would have really talked about generations ago, but people have access to information now. Most choose not to use it, but people do have access to information and realize that, like, you've got people on the court who are, you know, nominated by someone who did not win the vote of most Americans in the presidential election, and then you know, they're approved by people who represent more tree stumps and corn stalks than human beings. So, I mean, that these are conversations that are happening now. I'm not saying that this is going to be something that happens in the near future, but, you know, when I hear this come up a lot in the talking about, like, should the court be expanded? And of course, Republicans say, well, you're going to be packing the courts then. All right, well, you already kind of broke that seal. Like, that already happened. The crisis of legitimacy has already begun. Where does it go from here? Well, I mean, even so, everyone has different views, right? So I'm probably one of the very few people I know. Everyone I know is like, oh my gosh, why don't they just pack the court? And, you know, I'm a moderate who doesn't trust other moderates. And so I say that to say, fine, we say we do something reasonable, and decide, oh, you know what, we're going to add, was it 4 more just seats or whatever it is. We're gonna push the court up to 13 or something like that. That's what we think is reasonable. Okay, fine. And then what happens when we lose interims and we lose the White House, and then they decide, because history has shown us that they have no boundaries. Oh, that's fine. We'll just put 27 on there. Great. And so once they do that, would we ever have the momentum to hit back? That's what gives me pause. Is you're still talking about people on the left who still want to uphold this idea that there's a degree of fairness, a degree of decorum that you're supposed to have, of rationalness that you approach every single engagement, this reaching across the aisle. I mean, to me, the aisle is now been blown to smithereens. I don't know what you're reaching across anymore. And I say that as moderate. So I just don't trust that once one of us pushes the nuclear button or so, you're not going to push it all the way. We're not going to say, hey, we're going to pack the court and then we're going to have 27 judges on. Although, if you think about it, as time goes by, the amount of Article 3 judges over time and the size of the US, how many is the right number of judges for the Supreme Court? Really? I mean, what is the right number? I don't know. I guess we could proportion it out by population size based on inception and as it's grown to see, but I'm sure that it is not 9.
Right.
But
No,
I don't
mean,
know.
yeah, everything else has grown, right? I mean, that's one thing that's been something. It hasn't been always static, but it's largely been static,
Yeah.
right? But to kind of take the same thing you're saying, but from a different angle, what would you say to somebody who thinks that, okay, like, yes, I totally agree with you, but that's why we should expand the court, because otherwise we're continuing this dynamic of showing up to a gunfight with a butter knife, where we're the ones fighting with a hand tied behind our back, saying that we're going to have some sort of decorum. I mean, that's kind of what I'm saying earlier about that dam already being broken. I know I've mixed up like 5 different fucking metaphors right now, but it's been a long day.
Yeah, the
We're
horse is out
already
of the
there.
barn.
But I'm saying, we're already there. They've already done what they're going to do. Not that they're over and done with it, but they've already started this fight.
I think the fight started long before, and I would have probably shown up with my own guns to these fights at this long. I just don't trust that that's what people are going to do. Now, if we're actually going to have a duel or a gunfight, like with equal matching arms, then I do think that it makes perfect sense to do it. I just don't see the history or the will for people to do that. I mean, people are still trying to reason with Manchin.
Oh yeah.
I don't.
Yeah.
If we're still trying to reason with folks on our own side that are supposed to be helping us get things across the line, people are still trying to reason with Mitch McConnell. There's no reasoning with him.
Yeah, which is insane. Yeah.
So if you'll still try reasoning with this person, I don't trust that you will, once a nuclear option has been flipped, that you will then also go back and forth. And I guess what disappoints me the most is that the Supreme Court was supposed to be immune to all these things. I feel like I'm one of the very few people who is not angry with Justice Ginsburg for not retiring. Because technically, if I'm going to have these ideological issues with Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, and Coney Barrett, then I can't sit there and have expected her to retire because I wanted Barack Obama to appoint her person back when he had the sway. Because that institution is supposed to be impervious to politics. And
but don't you think though that by the time she was of that age and President Obama was still in office, the writing was already on the wall. The politicization had already happened.
I think that by the time it was very clear that the politicization was there, that he had already lost the Senate. I think that we're backwards looking and romanticizing that in 2010, 2011, even 2012, I don't think any of us would have ever even contemplated that we'd be where we are today. I don't think that anyone thought in 2012 that 2016 was going to happen, and everything since then. Now, about 2014, 2015, yes.
Most
but
definitely.
By then it was too late, right?
Yeah.
By then we'd already lost both houses of Congress at that time, and there was nothing that can be done. And we saw what happened with Merrick Garland. There was no way. But I don't know that argument, I think we all say woulda, coulda, shoulda, but I don't think that people saw, and particularly I will give, Notorious RBG is a very complex character. I don't really give her much latitude, but I do give it to her in the sense that I don't think that if I were her in 2012 even, that I would have believed that the whole nation was at this much of a risk. Much less if we're talking about ideals, should the entire nation and the entire judicial system sit on the back of one woman? Where do the American people have responsibility in making sure that they make decisions such that we don't need our elites to do that for us. So you can't have it both ways. We can't say on one end, how dare we get upset with Gorsuch and the rest of them for bold-faced lying about their politics to the American people and the Senate to get approved. But then we say, well, we're on the risk of losing everything. Ruth, get out the door right now. I don't think that we can do that. I just think that's a little hypocritical. Now, with the way things have gone, maybe we all should get down with a little hypocrisy.
Yeah, I was waiting for you to get to that point.
Maybe now. The only thing is, and now hindsight being what it is, do I wish that we had taken a different approach? Yeah, but I just don't think that people saw, and even cynical me, I think that I saw the writing on the wall around 2015, but 2012, 2013, I don't think that I was there yet. And so I know that someone that considers themselves a patriot, like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she wouldn't have thought that this was going to happen.
No, but I do remember when when President Obama did name Merrick Garland, you were the one person who called it. You wrote something on social media to the effect of, oh, you all think there's going to actually be like anything going on in the Senate. That's cute. Like, he's never going to get seen. He's never going to get a meeting with Mitch McConnell. Like, keep dreaming. And then, like, that was before Mitch McConnell penned that fucking WAPO op-ed about the American people need to have their voice heard and we need to wait for the election. Even before that got published.
Which is absurd, but they had already shown their hand that they were willing to do what was necessary to get their agenda through. I mean, you have to admire the sheer will in which they have pushed their agenda through. Much as it is terrifying, horrifying, Handmaid's Tale sounding, anti-American, and so I can't even call it shocking, because it's been like, this is the crusade that has been the long time coming. These are all the ideals that they have fought for. And if I was on that side, I would be celebrating right now, much like we were celebrating when Barack Obama got elected, because we thought that things had changed. Well, they do.
Did we? I mean, we were happy about him being elected, but did we think that like everything?
I think a lot of people were delusional.
I mean, a lot. No. I'm not saying we. I mean, like you and me individually. I don't mean like everybody. I mean, I always think back to that time, people thinking like everything's over now. It was that very much like, what's his name? Francis Fukuyama, like history is over. We're now living in like postmodern times. The problems are gone. And I'm like, yeah, he's not the Messiah. Love the guy, but
I didn't think that, because I was very much just like, look what all he had to be in order to get here.
Oh,
and
right.
Then
yeah.
Afterwards, look what followed behind him.
And look what preceded him. I mean, I'm not going to use the exact words that Chris Rock did, but like when people were saying, I mean, are we ready for a black president? Well, we just tried a mentally inadequate white one, didn't we?
But now we think that he was probably like a genius. I remember seeing him at, I think it was one of the funerals that President Trump wasn't invited to. And I remember seeing him and being like, oh my God, do I miss George W. Bush? Is this a thing? Is it possible? It happened. I was shocked by my own feelings.
Yeah, I think that was probably McCain's funeral at the National Cathedral.
Right. And at the time, I feel guilty because everyone was like mourning about McCain. And I was like, y'all, he still was not a hero for a lot of our causes. And now, what I wouldn't give for us to even have one McCain around now. The closest we get is Mittens.
Well, but to the point about Mittens, though, I mean, like the bar keeps on lowering on that side so far that then we have to keep on kind of recalibrating, expecting less and less. I mean, that's kind of love him or hate him. He's a complicated guy, but that's the joke that Bill Maher made, that in 2012 he wrote $1 million check to Barack Obama to keep Mitt Romney out of office. Now he'd gladly like give away all his money just to get Mitt into office.
Yep. Gladly. You
Yeah.
need to see me walk down the street with a Mitt Romney t-shirt on right now. Just to make sure that we didn't get can we even make Twitter jokes considering all that's going on with Elon Musk and Twitter right now?
Nah. I mean, you can.
Who knows what it'll be called by then. Although I think he's trying to terminate this agreement.
Oh no, now he's trying to back out of it. Yeah, now he's saying that
they haven't given him the correct information about the bots, so they can't.
Right, that he's right. Yeah, his attorney said that they were in material breach because they misrepresented the size of their user base by not being forthcoming about the proportion that were bots. Right.
Yes.
Which I'm sorry. I mean, you've heard of Google though, right? You could just like look up any article about Twitter bots, right?
I mean, you didn't think that when you were engaging with everyone on Twitter, Elon Musk. So I mean, that's not why you love the platform. So I think it's going to be an interesting argument. Don't envy those judges.
No. I mean, I don't envy anyone who has to come into contact with Elon fucking Musk, but seems like a dreadful human being. But yeah.
On to more dreadful.
But it's America, and because he has money, people somehow think he's therefore worthy of praise. But anyway. By the way, did you happen to catch any of today's hearings? January 6th hearings?
I am not engaging on those hearings because
okay.
I'll tell you why.
Okay, let's go for it.
I am very skeptical as to what is going to be the actual outcome of all of this, because you recall that lengthy examination. We talked about this after Mueller's investigation and all of the information and the months and months and the level of integrity he used to go through all that data and all of that. And then we got that scant report that was basically toothless saying, we're not going to do anything. Let the congressman handle it. And they didn't then. This man's been impeached. Nothing.
Teflon Don.
I don't know that I can sit there.
So you just don't want to get your heart broken again, is what you're saying, right?
I don't even know that I can call it broken. I think my heart broke when he got elected. Yeah. Everything after then, it was just kind of like, it's almost like a limbo game. Like, how low can you go? I don't know where we at, but I think we're like 2 notches above hell. And it's too hot around here for me to want to experience that. So but I hear enough of the hot takes coming out of the hearings in the news every day. And the shock factor, the wow factor. I still have yet to hear the specific smoking gun, I guess, that's going to come out. I mean, I think that we knew that he directed the people to go over there. I think we knew that his intention was to be over on the Capitol, leading the way, just because of how he basks in notoriety. I shudder to think what kind of constitutional conundrum would have happened if they had allowed that to happen. So in some ways, I'm glad that it did not, because I don't know then what we would have done. But what do you see coming out of these hearings that's going to be a productive use for the American people?
So it's interesting. I actually had a conversation with somebody on Sunday afternoon, not just about this. We were talking about all kinds of shit, but he had this moment where he just read my mind. He's like, we need to find mail fraud on these assholes. And he's, of course, referring to Al Capone, right? Like, we're not going to get like, Teflon Don in the Kremlin with Vladimir Putin making plans and then taking photos of it. Like that's never going to happen, right? Like whatever the pipe dream is,
we're never going to get it.
Well, right, exactly, right. No matter what, we're never going to have that smoking gun, whether it's on that aspect that Mueller was looking into, whether it's anything else. We're not going to get that, right? What I'm looking more for is stuff like, and I know this is like so boring to most people, but this is the shit that actually matters, right? I look at things like Letitia James's office in New York State getting his tax returns. I look at when Michael Cohen was dragged in front of Congress and AOC, who gets labeled as Miss Liberal Firebrand, actually sat there coldly and calmly and had him lay out the prima facie case for both insurance and tax fraud for the Donald Trump organization or individual and organization, excuse me. So with these hearings, I'm not looking for any kind of slam dunk that's going to end Donald Trump. That won't happen. What I'm looking for is what other crimes that are much more easily provable and more difficultly refuted, that whether it's Don himself or individuals in his circle can be charged with. And I'm thinking even just today, the bombshell, if that expression has any meaning anymore, was at the very end, Liz Cheney saying, by the way, everyone, there's a witness that is not yet known to the American public. What did she say? They were contacted by Trump and his people saying, you're loyal, we know you'll do the right thing. Rather than responding, their attorney reached out to our committee, and our committee forwarded that information to the Justice Department. Have a good day. Click, walked out. Like that was.
I mean, I get it, but I just feel like the difference between Al Capone and Donald Trump is that everyone wanted Al Capone to come down, and most people, I don't know if it's most people, but there's a strong contingency of people that don't want to see him fall. And so I think I agree with you. It's always people like, what is it? O.J. Simpson got caught on like stealing his own stuff back. Like, but that's the one that people wanted. Like they were waiting for him to have a parking ticket. Al Capone, they wanted him badly.
Yeah.
There's just not the same appetite for seeing a former president fall because it makes the institution look bad. So I don't know. I'm intrigued. If they have this witness that is going to, we know you're loyal. What does that
I know
mean?
it's some like cheesy, straight to DVD mobster movie bullshit. Yeah, it's pathetic, but
that's what that whole administration was like.
Yeah,
it was very much kiss the ring. No, you won't kiss the ring. Get out. Like,
yeah.
How many firings did we witness during his entire presidency? How many?
Oh yeah, I mean, like every administration, like the press secretary that's like quick burnout, no one lasts. Other like cabinet level positions, there's a lot of turnover over the course of 2 terms, but like that administration, month to month, I could not tell you who was the secretary.
There was a high firing every day. It was like his own reality TV show.
Yeah. I mean, it was like Celebrity Apprentice, but yeah.
Cabinet style.
Yeah, cabinet style. Oh my God. Yeah.
Which takes us back to, I can't believe that someone that treated the cabinet like Celebrity Apprentice appointed 3 of 9 Supreme Court justices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and then they are the fuel in the fire. They are exactly what the other conservatives need to push their agenda. And I mean, they've been lying in wait. Thomas has been trying to, or been biding his time to exact revenge ever since his hearings.
Oh, that man.
And I
want someone to do a page count on his opinions, because I am convinced that Roe opinion is longer than all of his other opinions combined. I have never seen him.
This is the guy who takes naps
during oral arguments.
During oral arguments, yeah.
Yes. the same guy that has asked like far less questions than Sotomayor has, and she's been on the bench for a fraction of how long he has.
Yeah.
I forgot the specific, but I think that by the end of her first term, she had asked more questions than he had in his entire decades of service. He just
let's not throw on the S word. This is a family show. Who the fuck is he servicing besides Ginny? Come on.
Well, evidently the was it the I don't know the folks that are pro-life have gotten their due service.
I mean, can we? But so here's one thing, and because I do messaging and work, do a lot of that. Anyway, it drives me nuts. This whole allowing them to still use that label pro-life. If you were pro-life, you'd be pro,
quality of life,
family leave, well, pro family medical leave, pro family leave in general, pro universal pre-K, pro, down the list, right? Like any of these policies would actually allow a child to be born and then have a reasonable expectation of being well-nourished, educated, cared for up through adulthood at the point at which they can then pay back into and give back to society. But instead, they are totally pro-birth. They're totally pro forcing women to carry pregnancies to term. And then once they give birth, fuck both her and the child. I mean, it's literally the George
Carlin it's joke. Not even like in the context of things, depending. I mean, we're gonna have to look at what these individuals do with like the threat of life to the mom, but it's not even like pro-child and mom, because in some instances, if you continue to preserve the pregnancy, the only thing you guarantee is the death of both of them. So,
right. Which, I mean, you would need to like basically pass 7th grade health and sex ed to know that. But I mean, it's not pro-life. It's punitive. I mean, the entire idea is like, we are going to force something upon people and watch as they suffer and enjoy their suffering. It's not pro anything. They're anti-choice, they're anti-women, they're anti-children. I mean, I can't stand this whole pro-life thing. Like literally, if you are not okay with a 13-year-old rape victim terminating a pregnancy caused by a rapist who might also be a case of incest, so just add that variable onto that. If you're not okay with that and you're willing to risk the life of a child trying to give birth, carry a pregnancy to term, how are you pro-life to anyone? And like, let's be clear about something. I mean, states like Missouri had literally one clinic left open prior to this on the state line. And Texas, the second this decision came down, they had a half day in the office of the AG to honor all of the quote unquote dead babies who had been killed, and then immediately put in place an outright ban statewide.
I mean, well, we know that this is really, I say the same, almost seems cliche, broken record. This isn't about getting rid of abortion. It's about cutting access to safe abortions. It's about making sure that poor people have less choices than those that have access to resources.
Right.
It's about making sure that you are cutting access to women's health, period. These same clinics are the clinics that give low-income women access to gynecological care that has nothing to do with having babies. And now you're talking about people who don't have the money to travel the hundreds of miles outside of state, losing that access.
Right.
So that's what this all comes down to. It is very anti-women. It is anti-child. And it is, as you said, it is not about life. Because what is life without equality of life? Right. What is life without anyone thinking about that 13-year-old? What is exactly pro-life about being completely fine with men being executed in your state who are probably innocent, with very minimum facts and also possible information to show innocence that you don't have brought to bear before someone is executed. I'm looking at you, Texas, and not having issues with that, but you don't have a single problem with women being forced to give birth to children that are the products of rape, incest, that are going to cause permanent damage to the mother, which in then terms means that the mother can't properly parent herself if she's a child, or with those kinds of health conditions, afford to properly care for her child. So these are not things that were thought deeply on.
No.
It is rooted in religious dogma that, according to us, is not supposed to run our nation, because which amendment is that? The First Amendment? That's freedom of religion.
Yeah.
All of this is rooted in that, because you are not talking about, scientists haven't given us a specific moment as to when life begins. So you have created this moment out of your religious beliefs that you're now enforcing for everyone else, which if I came out of the Quran, I'm sure we would have come to a different conclusion.
Right. I mean, but that's the same thing as the stupid praying coach case, right? I mean, wait until there's a Muslim coach. All hell will break loose. Just wait. By the way, I love that too. I love the whole like American thing of like praying at a fucking football game. It's like, oh yes, like a billion people in this world do not have access to like clean food and water or adequate nutrition. And but your God cares about your fucking football game. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
But it's even that's the case that they chose to take. Like, you thought that up against abortion rights, Miranda rights, that this coach playing at a football game was up on par with those.
Well, because let's remind people too that like the Supreme Court very much chooses what it wants to decide. Yeah. I mean, it there's this issue of standing. Like if you, there's a reason why in our country, as opposed to some European countries, you can't bring a theoretical or a clarification kind of case about a certain law to the Supreme Court. You have to actually have some reason why you've been harmed by an existing law, and then go up, work your way up to the court, and then at that point have them rule on it. But even then, they get all these applications every single year, to use plain English, applications we'll call them, and they don't respond to all of them. They pass them back to the lower courts. Right. Yes.
Which is also people's argument for why the court should be bigger, because in theory, if the court was bigger, they could take more cases, which I doubt is what would actually happen.
I doubt that would actually happen.
That's not how that would work.
Yeah. No, I am all for taking the fight to the right-wing nut jobs and just completely going at all out, being as brutal as they are, because I think we can afford to do no less. That being said, I have no reason to believe that would actually happen. They would in any way improve efficiency or improve outcomes. But
I'm just so it's so demoralizing that so much of what we thought would come to pass actually would. So I, feel like I was like, oh, I mourned the loss of Roe back in 2016. Like, yeah, that's what it was, right? It only took, but I thought it would take a little longer. Yeah. I didn't think it would be. I'm like, oh, well, there goes Roe versus Wade. I mean, I said that sarcastically. I thought it would take more than 6 years.
I mean, you said it, but like it was definitely, even in the moment, half kidding, right? There was a tinge of sarcasm, but it was based on a real concern.
I guess I didn't think, I think, and I guess the thing that I struggle the most with is people's point that, well, which wanting to air quotes be precise, like abortion's not illegal. It's just now up to the individual states. that's like saying, that's the equivalent of saying in 1865,
Right.
slavery is not illegal. It's just up to the individual states. Like, come on.
Right.
That's not if any woman anywhere, especially in states where they're punishing people who, which logically speaking, I don't know how this is going to work, but punishing any people who are ancillary to the actual performance of an abortion. So I guess like these people who are putting up statuses, which I don't think is a good idea. I keep seeing people doing it about the whole, like, if you're a person who is in need of camping,
Oh, yeah.
in my house, X,
Yeah.
Y, and Z. I know that sounds like a great idea, this, that,
Yeah.
and the other, but if people are able to actually go out and point people who aid and abet certain these procedures, I wonder just if those things would later be able to be used against them later down the line. I don't know that it's a good idea.
But then that goes to your earlier point about it won't actually ban anything. It will just ban safe abortion, accessible. And then because of course, like what you're talking about right there is basically already within hours of the decision, the creation of what's going to soon become kind of an underground system or a black market.
Which, who benefits from that, right?
I don't know. Usually when things get banned and it takes people operating outside of the law to get people the goods and services they need, who tends to fill that void? Oh, organized crime, right. Forgot about that.
Do we want organized crime syndicates overseeing abortions? Is that what we want?
I mean, they already oversaw drug and alcohol distribution during Prohibition and, of course, along the Mexican border with the current war on drugs. But, you know, no death and misery.
Why we know what this is all about, right? It's not really about, like, just like Prohibition was never really about getting rid of alcohol. I think enough of us watched Boardwalk Empire to know how that went. If we didn't study it enough ourselves.
Yeah, no, I mean, at this point, it's pretty clear that this decision comes down to control, imposing a worldview, imposing your will upon others. And the decision will ultimately have the greatest impact on women who don't have the means. Because, you know, if a Republican congressman does get his mistress pregnant, which you know is going to happen at some point, that's, I mean, you know, like the sun rising and setting, that will happen. You know, but
jurisdiction where it's not.
Well, no, I mean, it'll all transpire during an already planned vacation to New York or Paris or whatever. That's it.
What other cases do we even want to go into? I just think that Roe kind of did this almost like crusade action where it's like, oh my God, Roe happened. And so all the other cases that were decided horribly, no one's paying attention to because everyone's so focused on Roe that it's just like,
well, I mean, it's all happening within the span of a couple of weeks, right? You've got the gun case coming out of New York, which is batshit crazy, overturning 100 and some odd year law.
Let's go back to that one because that was actually fun to talk about. Let's go back to the gun case because irrespective of where you fall on the line of whether you're gonna, I can approach like we'll be fair in this. I'm a gun owner, so I am not a person that is like, oh, anti-gun. No. So let's just get that out of the way on the front end. However, when we talk about how this case actually was decided and what the shift in the rules and the framework is, it is mind-blowing. That Clarence Thomas has now decided, and the new standard for assessing whether there should be a limitation on guns is requiring people to look at the historical comparison in the past to see if this makes sense for the current government to do. I'm not quite sure how I'm supposed to use precedent from 1791 when AR-15s didn't exist to create legislation around AR-15. I don't know how that. And
Well,
if I'm
I mean,
not mistaken, someone correct me. I'm pretty sure that what was stated was that public safety was not compelling enough an interest.
oh no, that was exactly what was stated. Yeah.
To
Yeah.
justify the state not making the Second Amendment. What would they say? The Second Amendment's right to bear arms is not a second class right from the rest of the Bill of Rights. What does a second class?
Let's be clear though, all of the other amendments, for each other one, there is a whole body of jurisprudence around limiting and defining the contours of them.
Just like for just a very simple example. For example, let's go with the first one. Let's go with freedom of speech.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I both went to same law school. We literally had a whole separate, there's con law 1 and 2. And con law 2 is covering the full expanse of First Amendment and all of the ways in which it's qualified. You got your qualifications for being in school. You got your qualifications on hate speech. You got your qualifications on political speech. You have
the time, place, and manner restrictions of a jurisdiction mandating when a protest can occur. I mean, it's like, a whole body of.
You cannot stand up in the middle of a crowded event and yell fire.
That's the one everyone knows. That's the easiest one everyone knows.
Right.
And it's like, okay, so if we all know, even people who never went to law school, that there are exceptions to every rule, and that you can't yell fire in a crowded theater lest you trample people, have them killed, then it stands to reason that there should be a limitation on the right to bear arms, again, to prevent people from being hurt and killed. It's the same rationale.
The same exact.
I got nothing else. That was the whole point. That was it. I got nothing.
You know how there's some things that are just so basic that you can't even break them down even further?
Yeah.
That is that point. Right?
I literally could have given that same explanation to my son who's just finished first grade. I don't know how I could simplify it any further for parents.
I don't think you could.
I don't know if I could.
I don't think you could. And I think the actual statement that and it's always these cases that get me right. So I will never forget in again, going back to con law class, when we were talking about and again, free speech. And it was a grieving family's right to be free from emotional disturbance that rose to like a tortious level of emotional outrage because they're being picketed at the funeral of their loved one. And so the emotional affliction of that tort right up against the people's free speech to be able to do it, and that free speech always trumps that, and that always just stuck with me, right?
Yeah.
So that means that these things are not surprising,
right?
But it just makes you think about, so what would be enough exactly?
Yeah.
So when we're talking about school shootings happening, right? What exactly would be enough for the government to be able to curtail your Second Amendment right under this standard? I don't know what it possibly could be.
No, I mean, at this point, yeah. I mean, it was bad enough when Sandy Hook happened, and I was one of the people who quite cynically thought, well, if that's not enough, nothing will be. And yet then
we both agree on that. I think that after that happened, there was no hope anymore.
Yeah. No, I had lost hope at that point. Yeah.
But to be candid, I have not looked into what this new legislation that they're putting through now in response to the most recent school shooting. But
I mean, it's still evolving, but from what I've seen thus far, it's pathetically weak. It's, bumping the age up from 18 to 21, yada, 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 bullshit like that. But yeah, I mean, at that point, that was
But
it.
even talking about that measure, so let's take a look at that measure as an example, bumping the age from 18 to 21. Okay, the people that do these things, they're not getting, I mean, yes, in the last couple of shootings, the individuals were able to go and purchase those weapons. But in Sandy Hook, the boy took his mom's weapons.
Yeah.
So that's not going to be what gets us there. I am a gun owner who is for common sense gun legislation. I don't know completely what it looks like. I know what it doesn't look like, and that is comparing things to 1791. I can tell you.
Yeah, that. Right. Well, yeah.
I know that's not. I don't know.
I will tell you this. I'll tell you this. So I I grew up north, and I grew up in Massachusetts, where there's, so for one thing, that far north, no one thinks the Civil War is a cool thing to reenact. Like, there aren't reenactors like there are Virginia to Pennsylvania. That's not a cool thing, right? That being said, there's a lot of like historical events and fairs and reenactments and things like across history, and there's even places kind of like historic Williamsburg that's more famous in Virginia. There's other versions like that.
I've been there. Yeah.
But there's like, Old Sturbridge Village and things like that up north that are kind of equivalents, right? And they'll do demonstrations of the muskets that the English and early European settlers brought to North America. I sometimes go to the archery range with a recurve bow on weekends, and you could probably put 3 or 4 arrows in a son of a bitch in the time it would take for him to reload a musket from 1780 something. I mean, like, literally, you're talking like pouring gunpowder out of some like bull's horn and like backing down a lead
like take a little straw and get through.
I mean, it's a joke. It's a joke to make that comparison. It's like not applicable anymore.
Not applicable. Even how people fight wars are not like that anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're talking about a time when people would line up like we lined up in elementary school and walk in lines and firing
and get shot at
and being shot at. Like that was the way of things. Pre-guerrilla warfare, pre-drones, like no one contemplated a drone in 1791 being able to have that kind of intelligence. Like that's just not a thing.
But see, like I don't, so I just to zoom out for a second here, because I think we're making light of this, and we have to, because it's depressing and it's crazy. Like we both agree we don't see any hope on the horizon near term for common sense gun safety, especially after all these horrific massacres of children in this country. But on the other hand, if we're going to like thread, like, what's the connection between all these decisions, whether it's guns, abortion, whatever, where it's, or even the EPA decision, to really put a finer point on it. The idea, but the idea is, though, and this is like, it has been a right-wing fantasy for decades now, is to make the federal regulatory system impossible to manage and implement, and bring us back to this 18th century idea of just sort of the elected branches of government plus the judiciary, but have none of the agencies that are able to actually carry out decisions, able to regulate industry, regulate dangerous products and weapons. I mean, these are things that give a lot of power back to industry and a powerful few, and they don't want to have those sort of limits on their power that the regulatory state imposes for the benefit of public health and safety.
Well, let's be even more cynical and make it plain.
Yeah.
What is at the core, what is the actual real argument between states' rights and federal rights? What is the, which goes back to what I just said 5 minutes ago. What is it? It is what the Civil War was fought over. It is what is the difference between all of it. It is being able to enshrine the privileges of the white male patriarchy up against women and minorities. That is the entire point, because the federal government historically has been used as a tool to pry some of that privilege and power out of the hands of those people. That's what states' rights is about. So when you say to people, I mean, honestly, when you talk to most people, I was educated Black people, when you say states' rights, to us, that's like a metaphor for
it's a proxy. Yeah, it's a proxy. Yeah.
That's what it is. And so when we're talking about these specific pieces being rolled back and being put back into the hands of state governments, that's what you're talking about. And then the question becomes, if your goal is to make the federal government toothless, what are you trying to do that for?
No, but that's exactly right. I think you've answered your own question. I mean, it is to return that power to local state capitals so that and not to sound conspiratorial, not the ruling class, but the white men who are still overwhelmingly more politically powerful, more influential, far wealthier than everybody else in those states, have some of the control that they feel is their ancestral, their right, their privilege, that they feel has been stepped on by decades of progress that has been implemented and or enforced by the federal government, especially the federal judiciary, which brings us right back to the Supreme Court. And that's where we are now.
Which also even goes back to the thing that we haven't even brought up this hour, because it's been finally there's been something so much more, I don't want to say more important, but something else has taken center stage. But we just survived I don't even want to say it that way. I'm trying to pick my words carefully. We turned a corner in a pandemic, a global pandemic. What do we think would have happened if we allowed the states to run this entire process and the federal government hadn't been involved at all?
Well, this is the challenge that President Obama and any of his supporters have always come up against. It's impossible, politically especially, to sort of prove a negative, to say that, well, had we not done this, this is how much worse it would have been. No one's going to listen to an argument that lengthy. But you're right. I mean, within this country, never mind the rest of the world, within this country, we lost about, more than the population of Boston or Washington, D.C., just like gone, dead. But then how do you make the argument, had we not done X, Y, and Z at the federal level, had we not had these, programs for vaccine distribution, for lockdowns, et cetera, it would have been, 5 million people.
But I look at, as I'm going, because I'm looking at the Supreme Court cases, which is interesting, going through them, even because I hadn't even thought about it until recently.
Yeah.
And the difference between, going back to your point about industry, that COVID in the workplace, employers could not have this in place. No.
Right.
We're going to protect industry at all costs. No, we can't do that. But when it came down to healthcare facilities, there was a little bit more oh, no. You can test healthcare workers now. You can do that. That's okay. But I just, when we're talking about hairline distinctions, there were two judges that were the difference in those two cases. In that instance, I'm looking right now, it was to no surprise, it was Roberts and Kavanaugh, who were the ones who flipped sides and said, no, you're not going to do this with industry. So no, you cannot have mandates for large scale employers. Nope, we're not going to do that. Yeah. But for healthcare facilities, nope, we're going to do that. So we're just talking about down to these two judges. what happens if we had had a passport? What happens if then? And how would that have impacted the spread of the virus if healthcare workers were not required to still be tested?
Yeah.
And that's one example with that had huge impact on the turn of the virus, right?
Yeah.
So when people say that these individual decisions don't matter, or they don't, they're so removed from it. I guess that's the other thing I wanted to get back to is I wonder how people really feel like, I am a sarcastic person, and I definitely was snarky when the Roe decision came down, and was just like, look, if you didn't vote in 2016 or you voted third party, you don't get to complain right now. I do wonder how those people process and reconcile those pieces, because that is what a lot of us argued was on the line in 2016.
Yeah, no, that's true.
And so how do you reconcile that? How do you reconcile with a populace that feels disengaged and doesn't trust the courts? But if you don't trust the courts and you don't participate, you're invariably giving them more power. Because one thing that I wanted to go back to is when you're saying that people are not trusting of the courts and that they're going to reject, what they are not likely to reject, though, is the rule of law. Because you reject the rule of law, you create a place where either you have martial law that comes into effect, or you forfeit your illusion of safety. And I don't see people rejecting the rule of law. I mean, even police officers are killing kids and killing, and to be perfectly honest, killing white kids. And even going back to the top of the hour, talking about killing innocent people.
Yeah.
And we still cling to this notion that they're saviors. I mean, I don't like bringing up the recent, I don't always pronounce the name right, but the Valade shooting in Texas. I mean, that is a gross example of where we give up a lot of our freedoms with the expectation that in those moments, our police force will protect us. And they've
Which,
shown,
of course,
they
famously didn't. They famously didn't. Yeah.
And they famously didn't, and have shown that they didn't on various levels. But we still believe in this notion that they are worth giving up these freedoms for. So even if people say they're going to reject and they don't trust the courts more, what does that look like? Because you're not going to, all of a sudden go towards anarchy. That's not going to happen.
No, not all of a sudden. My point wasn't so much does an individual person who's trying to be rebellious not listen. My point was much more like a government agency, a different branch of government, a state government. I'm not saying in the current dynamic right now in 2022, but playing this out, extrapolating from this point. Yes, I hear your concern. If you've got a place where we've got a president in the White House who's aligned with the Supreme Court as it currently is, of course, all bets are off. The executive can, of course, enforce the law with literal force. But let's be real. The Supreme Court justices who are on there now, who are, I won't say conservative, they are radicals, they are right-wing extremists. A lot of them are shockingly not much older than you and I. They are really. Then I. They are, in the grand scheme of things, very young jurists, and they were chosen in part for that reason.
You're exactly right. They were chosen for that very specific reason. Because what do we always say? I say all the time, it was 4 years for the next 4 generations of the rest of our lives.
Exactly. So, but then I guess my point is, though,
on the court for at least the next, Amy Coney, those people, Amy Coney Barrett, Kavanaugh, they got another 40 years in them. Easy.
Well, I guess that's my point, though, is so I'm not saying, will, Joe Schmo not listen tomorrow? No, he'll get arrested. He'll get whatever. But I'm saying when it comes to a point where it's 30 something years from now, those assholes are still there, make some other batshit crazy decision. And the future president, the future governor of California, Massachusetts, New York, whatever, goes yeah, okay, fine. Cool thing you wrote there, buddy. We're not. You in what army? Hey, that's a scary
If Texas
thing.
wants to do it, why can't California to that instance in a whole different way?
Yeah.
But I think I agree with you. I'm getting at something else, which is a lot of this talk and this rhetoric that gets people fired up, it makes people rebellious, right?
Yeah.
And last time what that rebellion looked like was non-participation. That non-participation is what got us here, which is these people now
totally
have more power.
Yeah.
So what do we do to combat that? Because especially as we're sitting right at midterms, I don't even know how you redirect this train. But the first thing that popped in my head was, in theory, a place like California being like, well, I'm not following this. That's great. But that rebellious spirit has translated to the general populace as even more indifference. And that indifference has made these people even more powerful. So it actually made me even more nervous as to what we have to look forward to if people are so, like, their anger turns into inaction. Or, right. As I love to say, I'm like, you guys want to protest after the bad thing happens.
No, which is where we're at now. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Like, you're protesting after the bad thing happened, when you could have marched to the polls to stop the bad thing from happening.
You could have organized your friends, your church, your school, no, I hear you.
It could have. So I guess, how do we combat that? Because, when people call me and ask me, or they say to me like, oh my gosh, we have to fight Roe versus Wade. And I'm just like, fight what?
Yeah.
There is no fight. There is no, there's nothing.
That fight was years ago.
I don't know. And then I don't know what a federal right to abortion looks like once it gets challenged by this court, right? So the argument is now we're going to try to put in place this, like that they're going to somehow try to do some kind of federal legislation that puts this right in place. Okay. So then what happens when the states challenge it and it goes back up to the same court? I'm not trying to be defeatist. I'm just trying to understand what actual next steps can be done at this point. And I legally, the legal mind that I have, am not seeing how you're going to get that to work, much less that's even if you can get a federal mandate like that through. I don't.
No, at this point, you're right. It's not, at this point, it's not a simple legal question, nor is it a simple electoral question. It's back to square one. It's back to like starting all over again with a social movement that turns into a political movement that then has a whole new body of jurisprudence that grows out of it. But that's a decades long process. That's not something we can forecast the contours or the steps of right here, right now. If we did, we could probably be, really successful strategist, but I just don't think that any one of us has a path forward that's that direct or that clear. Yeah.
And I think that that's the frustrating thing for me is, okay, now you have people who are really angry and they are charged up and they want to do something. And all I can say is, well, it's kind of too late.
Yeah. I wouldn't say it's too late in terms of like a long-term fight. It's not too late to start a whole new, because don't forget, this right-wing attack on women, on the right to choose, on civil rights, on voting rights, on whatever, they started the night after they lost on the Voting Rights Act, the night after they lost on Roe versus Wade. They got together and they do what Democrats say we should do, but they actually
never do.
They took one night to lick their wounds and cry and drink about it, and then the next day got back to work. And they have been so when you talk about like how did they get this to happen? Well, once Roe decided, right? They spent 45 fucking years. Plan. Right.
But what kills me is the people that are acting shocked. I'm like, no. They've been on this crusade since long before. Like, I was not born until 1986, so long before I was even thought of.
Yeah,
they were on this crusade.
So they started this shit in like 1970. Yeah.
Right. Like, Roe came down and it was like, okay, we'll lose to them. It was losing a battle, not the war.
Right.
And now I wonder what's up next. Like, I just, and then it also makes me think of, well, what else is left? So, we also haven't gone to the piece of, I want to say, what is it? Clarence Thomas uniquely, and everyone has jokes about it, right?
Yeah.
Specifically said that because of this Roe case,
all the other decisions he wants to return to.
He wants to return to. Obergefell, and specifically talking about Lawrence, and specifically not mentioning Loving versus Virginia.
Which, of course, for anybody who doesn't know, is the 1967 decision from the Supreme Court that struck down any of the quote unquote anti-miscegenation or anti-interracial marriage laws in mostly southern states up until that point. So, and of course, he's married to Ginny, who's about as white as the paper in my photocopier. So yeah, I mean, that's been like the Facebook joke for weeks now. It's like he listed every single case that expanded or rectified the lack of expansion, maybe we should say, yes, on personal and human rights in this country in the past half century, with the exception of the case that opened the doors for interracial marriage.
To which case?
So you were saying about hypocrisy earlier.
So then I go back to you. So what we're really gonna, I guess, like, we're really gonna open the door on Lawrence. But I guess I don't know what that even sounds like.
But does it not fit into the paradigm you already set forth about this being truly about this level of control, this return to a control of others?
It absolutely does. I just, because of, I'm like, if they can, I guess in my mind, if they can strike down Roe, then they can strike down Lawrence. Sure. Now, when we're talking about Lawrence, like, going back to what your point is, like, everyone doesn't, the common person's like, well, what is she talking about, Lawrence? The root of
it's your right to get head is what Lawrence is.
Well, it's also the right, generally speaking, that protects our LGBT plus community and ensures that they have constitutional protections from state governments.
Well, yeah, but let's be a little, and we can be a bit clearer too. That's like, yes, there's that, but it's the fact that before marriage equality was the law of the land, right? There were still laws on the books in many states that criminalized, like literally criminalized, many sexual acts between consenting adults. Yes. And they were explicitly or implicitly targeting, members of the LGBTQ community. That being said, that same community has reached out to, those of us who are not part of it, finding common ground and saying, like, yes, it did target members of the community, but should this decision be reversed, it would also target a lot of activities engaged in by straight adults as well.
And which I think is unfortunate that argument even has to be made, right?
It's so sad. It should not be made at all.
Which I agree with you, which is why I never come at it from that angle, but it's true. With some, just like, but no, just like Roe is the protection, it is the bedrock that establishes this right, because it's all rooted in this right to privacy. And so what Clarence Thomas is saying is that we just basically made this up. We just, like, this is not a thing. That this right to privacy is somehow not extent. I just think, like, either the right to privacy exists or it doesn't. So how can I guess, like, just logically speaking, going back to our joking at the beginning of the hour, which is you can't list out all these other cases, right, and then exclude the one that
you benefit from. Yeah,
I guess you could.
He did. But that's Clarence Thomas for you. That's his thing. Brittany, listen, we could talk all night, I'm sure, but at this point, I think we might have covered just about everything we can in almost 2 hours now. Shit, the storm must have passed.
It did, and I didn't lose my power again. If only like certain justices lost their power. If only the power went out for certain things.
Oh yeah. I'm just looking right now at your text, like, hey, I'm back on with power. I'm like, oh shit, that was an hour and a half ago.
Yeah. So I mean, I do think that we've covered a lot of pieces of what happens, of what has happened. And I do think that this is a moment that people need to really evaluate, because one thing that we can all be aligned on is that lack of participation is what got us here. It can't be the thing that this specific blow to all these rights cannot be the thing that pushes us towards even more inaction, because I shudder to think what else would happen.
Yeah, it's a cliche that democracy is not a spectator sport, but there have been a lot of people who've been saying things like, well, I hear Democrats saying you got to get involved, but I can't get involved if my rights are being taken away. It's like, well, the thing is, we all had to be involved. A lot of our involvement, you and I, and what we do is not paid work. It's not things we get paid to do at our job. It's responsibility of citizenship to get involved in campaigns and work where you can and chip in where you can and be part of the process and be educated and be vigilant. That's unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, the cost we have of living in a democracy, at least relatively free society, as long as we still have one.
Well, then that goes to something that's completely separate, which we should probably talk about at some point, which is the education issues in a free society, and how they may or may not have led to this space. Because I think one of my friends actually posted something that shocked me to my core. It probably won't shock you, and it shouldn't really have shocked me. But it was saying that 54% of Americans read at lower than a 6th grade level.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if it's that number. I've heard that it was something like at or below a 10th grade, but
but that would make me feel better. 6th grade is alarming.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it's very alarming, but I think the average American doesn't read a book in the course of an entire year.
Well, I know most Americans don't read after they're like forced to in school. I know that.
Yeah.
But I remember, I think newspapers, and why I actually believe it is because I remember growing up with understanding that newspapers were written at a 7th grade reading level, effectively, so most people could read it.
Yeah.
And so, but I'm thinking to myself, every day when I was a kid, I'm sure you too, like you saw, like our parents, adults, everyone read the newspaper. Everyone, that was a thing, that adult, that was the hallmark of being an adult, was like, you read the newspaper.
Yeah. A raging caffeine addiction and newspapers. Yeah.
Now people get all of their news and information
on Facebook,
tweets.
Yeah.
160 characters that used to take articles. And so that's also a part of it.
That'll be the next conversation, media literacy. That's something that I bump up against in my job all the time. So,
well, as
Brittany,
always,
thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Hope we've gotten somewhere. I meant to tell you, I love this dad painting. It is giving me all the work.
Thank you. There's you can't see really off cameras. There's actually 2 other ones that it's part of a series that I've got here from my son.
So you're as he grows older, it's going to be even more like, it's not going to be.
So this is like with the help of stamps and teachers. The other ones are like actual painting with his fingers and toes, and so
it's going to grow. Your wall art is going to be really impressive.
I literally have a box big enough to probably fit like 3 or 4 like tower computers, like CPUs. That's just filled with my son's artwork that at some point I'm gonna have to like photograph and digitize to actually keep it long term. But yeah,
Yeah.
I keep all this stuff.
Oh, well, see, good to know. So you see there, kids, people, moms and dads, keep your stuff. So,
Exactly.
all right.
Well, thank you again.
I cannot wait to hear more of what comes next.
Oh yeah. Until next time. Thanks, Brittany.
All right.
Yeah. Bye. Hey there, this is Christian Hanley, and thank you for listening to Keep It in Perspective. If you like this episode or any other episode, please be sure to like and subscribe, and of course, share with your friends on social media. That's how we get the word out. Thanks.